Welcome to Session 5 in the UC Migration Webinar Series. I'm Rich Steves, Web Editor at TMC.
And I'm Alan Percy, Senior Director of Marketing at Audio Codes.
So what do we have for Session 5?
So Session 5 is about mobility, all right? So as businesses start to implement Microsoft Lync and they get more comfortable with it, now they start to think about how do I take it out on the road, be sort of untethered from the desk. So we're going to first analyze sort of what's happening in the market space when it comes to UC mobility, and then we're going to dig into some details in the actual process of implementing Microsoft Lync's mobile components.
Who are the presenters for this session?
So this particular session, we're going to be joined by a consultant, Mike Finneran. He's a principal at DBRN Associates. He's an industry veteran, and he's had this practice since 1982 and published a number of research reports, white papers, et cetera, on the wireless technologies, including Wi-Fi, cellular, WiMAX, fixed to mobile convergence, et cetera. And he's, of course, a frequent industry speaker, and real glad to have him as part of the series here. In addition to that, too, we're going to have Benjamin Tosato. He's a Vice President of Professional Services at Conquest Technology Services. And he's very passionate about enabling business and technology. Through his career, he's helped a number of organizations implement unified communications and, of course, Microsoft Lync. And he's intimately involved in the mobility application for Lync.
Great. Should be an interesting session. Let's hear what they have to say.
All right.
Thank you very much, Alan. Well, let's get things underway. My part of the presentation is to talk about the overall market for UC mobility, some of the challenges you'll find you're facing, and why Microsoft's entry into this really could be a game changer. Now, first off, let's talk about what's going on in wireless in general. First and foremost, life is great. I just got back from the Mobile Connect conference in Boston. The mobility market is going like gangbusters. iOS and Android devices have really redefined what people expect when they're mobile. But the consumer mobile experience is really shaping people's expectations. The countless of the presentations I listened to in Boston talked about the challenges enterprises are going to have in matching the consumer mobile experience. But it's certainly happening. Just in this past year, 2011, the number of smartphones sold in the United States finally passed the number of basic handsets. And now with the growing deployments of 4G, wireless networks are catching up to the wired networks with regard to reliability and capacity. So things are happening on the consumer side, but the big question is, what's happening on mobile UC? Well, for the moment, not a lot. All of the IP, PBX, and UC vendors have introduced mobile UC clients. The user take rate we found has been way below expectations. Now, there are a couple of special challenges we have in enterprise mobility that do go to a point of explaining these. First off, the mobile business is clearly shaped by the consumer market. So essentially, we're looking to do business with what have now become consumer tools. Of course, with the move to bring your own device, our short-term challenge is balancing user requests and preferences with the enterprise requirements for security, control, and support. That's probably the one area where I spend the most time with my clients today. But really, I always try to point out to them that that's really your short-term objective. Yes, BYOD is coming about. There's no doubting it, and there's no stopping it. But we have to look beyond that to the real purpose of this, which is to enable business transformation based on mobility. That is, putting these tools to their best enterprise use. Now, there are a few core benefits we find applying mobility in the enterprise. Three to be specific. One is accessibility. It's one of the big features you'll get with Lync Mobile. You're able to reach critical people at critical times. Critical people are typically the one person who has the correct answer, or the manager with the authority to say yes to an exception. Of course, we've all seen the enhancements in terms of productivity. That was led clearly by the ability to have mobile email and then mobile text. But now the ability to access information while outside of the office really produces one of the ways that businesses can really differentiate themselves from the competitors. So the result of that, in the short term, is business responsiveness. Businesses can operate more efficiently, more effectively, and more productively. But the longer term is transformation of the business itself. And that was one of the big topics that was discussed at Mobile Connect this week. How do we affect that business transformation? That is getting the right information to the right people at the right time for a competitive advantage. Now, certainly, fixed mobile convergence and mobile UC will be a part of that. And as I mentioned earlier, virtually all the IP, PBX, and UC vendors have introduced something in the way of a mobile UC offering with few sales. It's still the case today that the major vehicle for fixed mobile convergence is call forwarding or simultaneous ring or find me, follow me service. All we're doing is ringing the phone, the call to the person's desk and ringing their mobile simultaneously. To take that a step further does require a mobile client, like Lync mobile client, or in Cisco camp it's Java, in Avaya it's 1X, Siemens it's OpenScape Mobile, NEC it's the MC550. But when you look at it, mobile UC should be a success. I mean, basically, we still need a business telephone system. It's still going to be there. And users are dividing their time between their physical work location and their mobile presence. Wired UC clearly has demonstrated that we can provide way better tools for enterprise communication and collaboration, which the integration of wired and wireless should be a key element. And also, if we have a dual mode version, one that works on the Wi-Fi network when one is available as well as cellular, on the cellular savings, the solution can pay for itself. However, the users have been slow to act up to now. We have a slide here from an Information Week analytics survey on wireless LAN. One of the questions they asked 242 business technology professionals was, what's your take on fixed mobile convergence? And basically they found 4% takers. Of course, they didn't define exactly which flavor of fixed mobile convergence. Of course, the big blob to note there is 54% express interest but have no specific plans. Only 18% said no interest and 13% had never heard of it. So what that says is there is a real opportunity to be had here. So if there's user interest, there's an obvious business purpose to this, why has mobile UC not been happening? First off, mobility is a big topic in UC. However, at the mobility conferences I go to, UC doesn't even come up as a topic. The mobile world is working at the moment independently of the UC world. One problem I've seen directly in user acceptance is the mobile UC client provides a disintegrated user experience. Users like the way their mobile phones work, and generally the mobile UC clients act like a separate dialer. So basically, the user makes his personal calls one way and their business calls a different way. They don't like that. Also, a lot of the capabilities that we talk about in UC, like click to join a conference, dial out of any application, we've had those capabilities for years in smartphones independent of UC. One of the biggest things, and one of the areas you have to be prepared for is cellular buyers operate independently of IT and with their own set of issues. The things we talk about in mobility are app development, mobile device management, mobile application management, and security. We have a whole list of issues, and integrating with a wired network is fairly far down the list. Also, while that WLAN, the option of working on a wireless LAN can be financially attractive, many organizations have a lack of faith in their wireless LANs actually supporting voice. Truth be known, every wireless LAN can support voice. The question is how many simultaneous calls should be supporting out of a given access point. But as I mentioned, Microsoft may have the key here to succeed where others have failed. Now, first off, Microsoft is coming to this market from the desktop rather than the PBX direction. So we're heading in at this from a different vector. And we are seeing a real change in the buying posture. A few years ago, the mobility buyers I dealt with were essentially purchasing folks whose primary issue was, where can I get the best deal for minutes? The apps, security, all the BYOD issues didn't exist. So really the mobility responsibilities really being taken over much more so now by IT. Also, the Lync does support the major operating systems, iOS, Android. Of course, the Microsoft does push Windows Phone. There is also a Lync mobile client for BlackBerry devices. That's actually produced by RIM themselves, not by Microsoft. But if Microsoft chooses to really take advantage, they could potentially, having control of the Windows Phone operating system, they could actually build a much more tightly coupled mobile UC client than any of the other IP-PBX vendors have been able to do. They have control of the UC platform and control of the mobile operating system when it comes to Windows Phone. And some of the early adopters we've heard from. We had a speaker on one of the panels I ran at Enterprise Connect this year from Lionbridge, who was absolutely enthusiastic about his Lync mobile experience, and they were using Windows Phone. So the market really hasn't launched to a great degree as yet, but I really feel that Microsoft's entry into this does change the calculus significantly, and certainly there is user interest in better integration between these two. It's just how we're going to be able to bring it about. So, Alan, with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Some great perspective on where we are in the UC space and mobility, and I appreciate you sticking around later to answer some of the questions. So next up, quick introduction here. We've got Ben Tasato. He's Vice President of Professional Services at Conquest Technology Services. Ben is passionate about enabling business with technology. Throughout his career, he's worked with hundreds of organizations, including government agencies and Fortune 500s, to solve business problems with technology. Throughout his tenure as Conquest founder, principal, and head of sales and technical teams, he has built a practice focused on Microsoft's communication solution. At Conquest, he has led his team to architect, design, deploy, and support solutions for some of Microsoft's most valued customers. And Ben has a number of other credentials that help with this endeavor. And Ben, in addition to being a proud father and resident with his wife and daughter in Florida, Ben's going to be presenting his presentation about deploying the mobile client from Lync. And so, Ben, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks for spending a couple of minutes with us today. My name is Benjamin Tasato, as Alan was saying, and I'm from Conquest Technology Services. We're going to be walking you guys through some of the Lync mobility client facets and deployments that we've done and some of our experiences around the Microsoft developed Lync mobile client today. So to kind of kick things off, let's kind of take a look at what the Lync mobile client is from a capability perspective and from a supportability perspective. So the mobile client for Lync has some really great features, but it's not completely, it doesn't have complete feature parity with the full Lync client, as Alan was kind of saying on one of his slides. So what you get with the mobile Lync client is instant messaging and presence, right? So you can IM your colleagues and you can see if they're available or not. You get a contact search, so you can search the corporate directory for Lync users just like you can in your Lync client. One of the very best features that I think Microsoft included was you got a click to join meeting capability. So if you're in your calendar on your phone with the Lync mobile client, you can actually click the link for an online meeting, and it'll automatically call your mobile phone and join you into the meeting that way. So big improvement as opposed to having to dial in a telephone number and then a code, et cetera, to join a conference call. You got a call via work feature, and this is kind of what Alan was talking about on his slide that works via that hairpinning, and then that works over your cellular connection, uses cellular minutes. You're basically going to be able to call any of your colleagues using your Lync phone number, but the call is actually going to be going over your cellular minutes and up into your Lync infrastructure over the telephone network with that hairpinning. And then you can manipulate your call forwarding settings. I think that this is pretty useful too. So if you've got simultaneous ring turn on, basically where if somebody rings your Lync number, you're also ringing your cell phone. If you don't have the Lync mobile client, you have to log back into your PC to turn that on or off. The Lync mobile client actually gives you the capability to do that on your mobile device. So there are a couple of different mobile platforms that Microsoft went ahead and developed this client for. So iOS is one of them. The iPhone and the iPad devices both have clients. Windows Mobile 7 devices have clients. That's the one that I use. Android devices, there's also an Android client, and there's a Symbian or Nokia client. It's important to note that while these different clients are very similar in terms of which features they support, they're not identical. So what I've done in here is included a link to the feature comparison that Microsoft has that identifies which clients on which platforms have which features. As an example, push notifications are only available on the Windows and the Apple devices, and we'll get into why that is in a couple of minutes, but that's just one example of how they're not all identical. The iPad client obviously can't do a call from work kind of functionality because iPads don't have cellular minutes. So that's another kind of example of that. In addition to the feature comparison link here, I've actually got a link to Redmond Channel Partner Magazine. This is where I basically wrote an article on this when Microsoft came out with the client, or shortly after that, in like December, January this last new year. And this describes some of the functionality that the client has in more detail than we have on the slide, and it also has some nice screenshots of the client itself. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the user experience that's involved with the mobile client, you can definitely visit that site and check that out. So this is a kind of a high-level, little bit more technical slide, high-level architecture of how the Lync mobile client works, right? So just like your Lync client, it registers automatically with the user just entering their email address and password, right, or their SIP URI and password. And it does this via a set of DNS records that you set up that allow it to automatically discover where it needs to connect to get into your Lync infrastructure. You have to set up a pair of these records because Microsoft architected this solution to be able to work in environments where you've got cellular and Wi-Fi networks as connectivity means for these mobile devices. So if you look at just about any mobile device today, you've got the capability to connect up to services via your cellular connection, your 3G or 4G or LTE or whatever you've got on your device. And you've also got the capability to maybe be in the office on the corporate network and connect via Wi-Fi. So Microsoft went ahead and architected the back end of their mobility solution to be able to seamlessly support devices connecting over both the cellular connection and the Wi-Fi connection. And there's a pair of DNS records you have to set up to make that happen. The mobile client uses all web services, right? So the reverse proxy in your Lync deployment is the key kind of component that allows these mobile devices to connect up into the Lync infrastructure and provide all of the services that we were talking about earlier. So these are some deployment considerations, and these are kind of some of the technical considerations that you've got when you're going ahead and planning a deployment of this Lync mobile client. So DNS records is one thing. I kind of mentioned this earlier. You've got internal versus external records for Wi-Fi versus cellular. Your external DNS records are going to be pointing at that reverse proxy to connect folks in who are using their cellular connection. And then your Wi-Fi clients are going to be connecting into your front-end server with a record that you're going to set up on your internal DNS system. Certificates, this is something that we've run into as an issue that's kind of interesting. I said earlier that you've got these two DNS records, internal and external. You've got to have a certificate on your reverse proxy for the external record and a certificate on the front end for the new DNS record internally. The issue that we've run into with this is you've got situations, a lot of situations, where customers use self-signed certificates for their front-end servers. It's actually a recommended practice, right? So the issue with that is a lot of smartphones don't support self-signed certificates. So on devices like iPhones, where you can't instruct the phone to ignore the fact that it doesn't trust the certificate, you run into some issues. So we've overcome that by by doing some modifications in the records that point them outside of the firewall and some different things like that. But it's important to consider that when you're doing a deployment or you'll run into some gotchas there. Push notifications is interesting. The way that these are handled is you actually have to federate your Lync deployment with Microsoft's Lync implementation in their Lync Online offering. And from there, Microsoft takes, you send your push notifications out through your Edge server. Microsoft takes them and then sends them to their own push notification service for Windows phones and Apple's push notification service for iPhones and iPads. So that's something that's important to kind of understand and just consider if you're planning on doing push notifications with these mobile applications. Last but not least, enterprise voice. You do have that call from work feature. You've also got that one-click to join conference feature where a conference bridge will actually call you from that single click on your phone. To have either one of these capabilities, you need to have telephony integrated into your Lync deployment. You need to have it hooked up to the telephone network. And when you're doing that, it's important to understand how much trunking you're going to need for it, because the call via work feature, for instance, actually uses 2 trunks every time you make a call. It uses one to receive your call and another one to go ahead and call the person that you're attempting to call with the feature. So just important to know how many users you're going to have on the solution versus how many trunks you have. So this is a high-level deployment process, and I'm gonna do kind of a one-liner on each one of these things. If you want details on the deployment process, I've included a link here to TechNet that really goes deep into the DNS, the specific records you need to create in DNS and which certificates you need to create, and gives you kind of a detailed process. But at a high level, the way that you roll it out is you create the DNS records that I mentioned, one internal and one external. You got to install a cumulative update that Microsoft released on November 11th of last year on all of your Lync servers. You've got to run a couple of PowerShell scripts on your front-end servers to set up some internal communication that they do as part of the mobility service. You've got to install the actual mobility service software on your front ends and directors. You've got to modify your certificates to accommodate the additional names that you create in the DNS records that you set up in the first step. You've got to configure that reverse proxy to be able to take connections from your mobile clients that are coming from outside of the firewall, over the cellular network, and translate them into your internal Lync infrastructure. You've got to set up that federation with Microsoft to do your push notifications, and then you've got to configure mobility policies that basically dictate which users have and which users have not access to the mobility client. So that's kind of a 40,000-foot view of the overall implementation process for the product. And with that, Alan, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it. Glad we were able to get your technical problems resolved and keep going. We certainly, us at AudioCodes, of course, have been participating in the UC implementation phase and have a few thoughts on this too here. Well, first of all, taking your UC experience in a mobile environment doesn't necessarily have to be as difficult as what this poor gentleman's had to do. And I have to admit, when we first implemented Microsoft Lync within our business, we had some challenges with. It sure was nice to be able to change your status and be able to communicate an instant message with people. But once you left your office, you lost all those features, and you were just basic phone capability. Or you had 2 domains. You had the instant messaging phone world, but not necessarily all the productivity tools you needed. So certainly, taking on the road, we really missed it. Another issue that pops up is this bring your own device situation, which is where essentially what's happening. Oh, there we go. Yeah, I can hear you, Ben. We'll get back to you. Yeah, no problem. We'll get back to you here in just a second here. So the bring your own device part of the market is an interesting challenge too. What happens when employees are given the option to go out and buy their own mobile devices, it's very difficult for business if you're not paying for the device and asking employees to pay for it, to require a certain version or a certain capability or a certain amount of processing power on the mobile device to give them access. So this creates sort of a new conflict. In addition to that, too, is the question of who's paying for the minutes on the mobile phone. And certainly adding mobile UC certainly will increase data usage and definitely increase voice usage, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. So what are the kinds of changes that happen in a business when it comes to deploying UC? First of all, the additional minutes that are driven on the devices, does cost both the user and the business. But some of the users actually might be on campus the majority of the time, and it turns out from many of the studies that from a mobile UC environment, that's a significant portion of the usage of the system. And that side effect of that is that here's all these mobile minutes and mobile data that are being used when the phone is actually on campus and could communicate through a Wi-Fi network. So, can we do that and how? And next is the discussion about, the mobile client that you use at your desktop needs to be sort of rewired or refit to fit on a mobile device. Now, whether it's, simplification of the user interface or, any one of a number of other modifications. So the point is that the UC experience and some core key functions need to be available in your pocket as part of the mobile experience. So how does this happen? And this is just a quick tutorial that explains how some of the call flows occur in a mobile UC environment with a Microsoft UC Lync deployment. And again, we'll skip back to Ben, and Ben will tell about how to do this implementation. But in a nutshell, what happens in the mobile Lync environment is the Lync client would go over your wireless provider or your local Wi-Fi network and initiate a session to the Lync server, asking that it would like to either change status or somehow participate. And then the Lync server actually initiates a separate voice path from the client that maybe you're trying to speak to through the media gateway or enterprise session border controller over through either your TDM or SIP trunking to the cellular network. And of course that delivers the call to the mobile handset. And the key thing I did want to point out in this architecture is with the current mobile Lync client is that it's burning cellular minutes for every minute that you're having a voice conversation with somebody that may or may not be on the Lync at the far end. So what's the impact of this? Well, certainly, as I mentioned earlier, or hinted earlier, this does drive up the voice minutes and data usage and significantly increases the trunk session usage. So you need to be cognizant of this when you're planning your gateway infrastructure. Another little scenario is when an outside caller dials your DID number in the Lync environment. So the call setup comes from a PRI, goes through, again, either the SIP or TDM trunks through the gateway into Lync, and then similarly initiates a session out to the mobile client saying so-and-so is trying to call you, do you want to speak? And if you accept the call, then a voice path would get set up. But again, what happens is the voice path comes in through your trunking to the gateway, then gets hairpinned, and you can see why we call it that, back out through another trunk port out to the cellular network, and of course then delivered to the mobile client. So this hairpinning effect really significantly impacts, again, the trunk usage and needs to be planned for. But we occasionally would run into a situation where a customer would say to us, you know what, this sending voice over the cellular network just doesn't scale for us. It doesn't work for us either from a technology standpoint or from a business standpoint. And there was strong demand for an integration of a voice-enabled mobile client. So about a year and a half or so ago, we initiated an effort to integrate our what's called VMAS mobile client into Microsoft Lync, and we've created an offering called Mobility Plus. And what Mobility Plus is essentially two components. It includes what we call Mobility Plus Server, which is actually a combination of either an enterprise session border controller or media gateway with an application server to run some management software and control software, and of course a mobile client that we've put available on any of the app stores or the Google Play store environment. And then the combination of these two components together produce a Wi-Fi enabled mobile client. And so what we wanted to do is show you the difference in call flows. If you remember back from a few minutes ago when we walked through some of the call flows, and you'll see the difference here with the Mobility Plus client on the device. And by the way, we can flop back and forth between clients, and we do actually do it within our own business, have both deployed simultaneously. When a call is initiated by the mobile device, what happens then is you're going over your Wi-Fi network to initiate the session to the Lync server, and then the Lync server initiates a client request that goes back through the enterprise session border controller, out through the firewall, out through the Wi-Fi network, and of course to the mobile client, providing voice capability over Wi-Fi. And again, what's the impact is it moves this voice traffic to the Wi-Fi network and can, in some cases, dramatically reduce minutes, which, for those large campus environments where there's significant investment in Wi-Fi, this is a good way to minimize costs. And you can imagine real easily those users that have these, mobile phones or on campus all day, that you can move quite a bit of traffic over to the Wi-Fi network. So again, it's not for everybody, but for certain applications, it seems to be a good fit. Did a quick comparison chart here between the two clients. Certainly a lot of the features are shared between them: the identity, the status, presence, instant messaging capability, managing your contact lists within the Lync environment. The big differences really are the voice over Wi-Fi or 3G capability that Mobility Plus provides. We also have a different provisioning mechanism with Mobility Plus. We call it the one password automatic provisioning, which is download the client from one of the app stores. You enter in, I think it's about an 8-digit code number into the device, and then from there on it takes care of all the provisioning. So you don't have to enter in any domain names or usernames or any of the other provisioning functions that unfortunately make the Lync client just a little bit more complex. And also too, because we're using a dedicated session border controller for security, and that's partially because of the Wi-Fi environment, we see much better security as a result of the SIP sessions. And I did want to point out, as a common question is, so when's video coming along? And at this point, neither client are offering video features, although rumors run rampant. Let's put it that way. So, all right. So a couple of closing thoughts, I should say, on planning for mobile UC. First of all, it's important for businesses to start out by taking a look at their BYOD strategy. Are they going to be asking employees to have their own smartphone? If so, is there going to be a reimbursement policy for the minutes that are being used or for the data plan? What kind of costs are going to be incurred on the employee versus on the company? Who's paying for that? Also, too, as Ben noted earlier, the trunk usage, whether it's a SIP or a TDM trunk, it needs to be carefully considered, because the additional trunking usage for the Lync mobile client will dramatically increase, that trunk usage. And again, if there's 1,000 employees who run around with the mobile client and they use it heavily, that will definitely impact the trunk usage. And one other last thought too, and this is something I sort of discovered in my own usage, is when we added UC mobility, what happens is you become basically always available. And I realize you can change your status on your phone, or you can use the mobile client to adjust your availability, but the reality is you find yourself available at much greater portions of the day when you used to be able to escape from your desk, and now all of a sudden you can't. So sometimes that's good, and sometimes it's bad, and you need to be cognizant of your availability status in your mobile device, especially in times when you maybe want a little privacy. So give that some thought.
Okay, a lot of great information about mobility there.
Yes, it was. It was a very interesting sort of in-depth look at the market and, of course, the actual process of migrating.
What can we look forward to in session 6?
So session 6, we're going to move on to branch office and branch office survivability. Obviously, a lot of businesses have branch offices, from retail to banking, and how do they integrate into a unified communications environment and also into Lync.
Okay. Well, that sounds very interesting. You should definitely check it out.
All right.